Hello, ProducTank. Welcome. It's so great to see so many of you here today, and thank you to everyone who's joining us online. Let us know in the comments where you're joining from, because we know that people are joining from all over the world. And just a few slides about ProducTank if you haven't been to our events before or you haven't heard about us before. So ProducTank is the world's largest product community, and we have meetups happening in so many cities around the world. So when you travel, make sure that you check out the meetup page, and maybe you'd like to join one of those. There are a couple of ways how you can get involved with ProducTank, except for attending our events. You're always welcome to become one of the speakers. So if you'd like to do that, please approach myself or one of the ProducTank organizers. You see them by the t-shirt sign. You're also welcome to host or sponsor our event, how Pendo is doing today. We are also very happy to come to your offices and host our events there, so let us know if you or your company is interested. You can also write for Mind the Product. We have an amazing blog section on the website, and we invite everyone to participate, so make sure that you check out the website as well. And finally, you can become a member. So we have a free Slack community with hundreds of people there, very active, very nice, and if you ever need any help, you're welcome to post there. So make sure you join it. We'll be using Slido, as always, during today's event. So please scan the QR code, add your questions there. We'll have the same slide later on as well, so if you don't scan it now, it's fine. But yeah, make sure you add your questions there and upvote the ones that you would like us to bring up. Awesome, and we'd like to thank our sponsor, Pendo, who sponsored this event today, who's making all of this possible. And we'll have Joe who will talk about the company a little bit later as well. All right, so I hope you're all excited about today's topic because there is AI in it, and we all are definitely excited about it. And we know that a lot of you have asked us to cover this topic, and we couldn't say no, so here we go. As all of you know, during the last year and a half, probably, there has been a lot of things happening in the world of technology and all of the things that were made available to us. So we really wanted to cover the topic of how AI has changed product management and how we can use it to build better and more innovative products going forward. So hopefully you'll have a lot of useful information today. And on that note, I would love to invite our first speaker, Joe Dreimann, who's the Senior Director of Product Design at Pendo. So please welcome Joe on stage.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see if the clicker works. Nope, other way. There we go, it is me. Hello, I'm Joe. I lead design and research for Pendo, and I'm based in Sheffield. You can tell that by the flat cap, which I'm not wearing today because I'm localizing for London, but we do wear them in the north. I'm going to talk to you about AI. This is the sponsor part of the talk, so it's probably not why you're here, but I'm going to try and give you something that you can take away to your own teams and think about how it relates to your work and apply it after this. So you've seen the headlines, partially why you've showed up today, I'm sure. ChatGPT is taking over the world, and the AI gold rush is here, and also, what's this generative AI stuff and how do I apply it? There are lots of open questions that I think people are wrestling with at the moment. I'm going to show you a few examples here from Y Combinator, who recently took on a new group of startups, and you can see they're using AI to disrupt industries like construction and tutoring. So these are old industries in a way where through the technologies of AI, we have a new approach to tackling the problems that they face. And in the age of intelligence, product must lead. So this is one of the changes that you're seeing. I'm not going to talk about Web3 today. I think that was a zero interest rate phenomenon, is my hot take. But I'm going to talk about software version 1, 2, and 3. The first one was just being able to instruct the machine to do things quickly for you. That was 2 or 3 decades ago, and it's not going to be enough for the future. The next level of software 2.0, where we started labeling data and we started providing more detailed and contextual information that is relevant to your actual customers. And we're moving out of that phase because you've seen the company succeed with that approach already. The next one, software 3.0, is probably working on the foundational models, training them, applying them specifically to the problems you've got, and then finding a way for you to pull ahead and away from your competition. You might have had the same experience as us. After ChatGPT blew up at the end of 22, we reviewed our roadmap and chucked it in the bin. A lot of this stuff that we had planned wasn't relevant anymore to address our customers' needs. All the expectations had shifted, where maybe it was the right approach before, but it wasn't any longer. It's tongue-in-cheek because we obviously did build quite a few of the things we had planned, but we did reconsider everything that we were doing as a business on whether it was still the right approach to that problem. Here's a quote from Sarah Guo. We expect the dominant companies of tomorrow to rethink every industry with intelligence. And I talked about what Software 3.0 means, using these new approaches and new technologies to tackle old and existing problems. And if you did not have the experience of throwing away your roadmap, I want to know why, because find me in the bar afterwards. There's probably some interesting story where you're stuck up with a stakeholder or someone who's not giving you the scope to explore and innovate. Let's find ways of doing that. This is one of the reasons you should care, and maybe one of the slides you want to reuse when you talk to your stakeholders about it. McKinsey estimated that there's a range of $2.6 to $4.4 trillion a year of value that's going to be added by generative AI. You can tell by the range just how uncertain they are about exactly what it's going to be. But I can guarantee you, if you capture one of those trillions, your boss will promote you. If you capture a fraction of it, your industry and your company is going to be transformed. So take it seriously, and I'd suggest use that if you want to convince a board member to do it. As a word of warning, AI is not a cheat code, and you still have to build a great product, right? And that means you're going to focus on your customer needs. How do you identify those? When you're having customer conversations, this is going really back to basics for product, for sales, for everything else. Try and find something that is a real acute pain for them. When you're having these conversations around need, it's not a vitamin that we probably should all be taking. Well, I didn't take one today, and I didn't bring them with me to London even, and I'm not missing them. But that's the kind of product that is easy to let go of if you're not feeling the pain acutely. But the painkillers, if you've got that headache, you're going to go and find them, and you're going to find a person who will sell them to you, or give them to you, or lend them to you, or anything else. And that is the kind of need that you're looking for in these conversations. Not nice to have, not someone just kicking the tires thinking, hey, this could maybe work for me or someone else in this business. And they're not going to buy, so don't get distracted by just the better habits. One of our values is being direct and transparent, so I'm going to tell you some of our approach of working in these technologies, which started way before the ChatGPT craze, starting with topics. So this is our feedback product that was built in Sheffield. And at the time, people were exporting all the feedback they were getting to synthesize it and create summaries and maybe write an exec email to try and get someone to listen to it. It was really tough, and we explored topics as a way of just grouping what we saw. Next level for us was actually a proprietary machine learning algorithm that we built at Pendo around MPS feedback. Now, it's a different kind of feedback, but what we were looking for are themes across everything that we found, and we create summaries of it too. So if your question is, what does my enterprise segment say in their first 90 days of use? You want an answer to that. And it has to be that specific. That's how we combine in our platform MPS feedback and our segmentation engine, for example. We also create AI summaries now of that. So if you have stakeholders going into the product and they want to explore what's the feedback, maybe get some of the evidence and build some of the empathy behind your product decisions, it's a great way of doing it. But going further, it says today, but we're not announcing it until May. There's a Discover product, which we started to work on, and we've got the people in the room today, Steve over there, together with Neve and Rebecca. They're part of the team in Sheffield in the second row. I'm going to just embarrass them briefly, who've built a fantastic new experience for how to deal with feedback. Instead of just getting a deluge of customer topics that you're struggling to fit into your roadmap in some way, this is much more focused around what are you trying to achieve as a business. You validate those ideas that you have. And then we provide summaries again as just a way of reframing and thinking about what the feedback is for certain groups, certain timelines, and you know that it's relevant to you. That hopefully is clear. It leverages machine learning to later generative AI. So we'll talk a bit about jobs to be done, because I talked about finding a pain point for customers. So once you have the pain point, you want to go a bit deeper. And I'm going to take two technologies here that you're probably all familiar with. Maybe not the first one, but that's part of the story. So GoToMeeting years ago, probably 15 years ago, identified this problem with meeting software where you need to have an account beforehand, before joining the meeting. You had to download the software, it had to be the latest version. You probably got an email with a password in that you had to remember at the time you wanted to join. It wasn't your calendar invite. And they made it much, much easier where you could just follow the link, join the call, and everything else could follow later if you did want to install or maybe sign up. They were pretty dominant for a while until Zoom came along, and especially during the pandemic, there were different problems that need to be solved, and Zoom recognized that better than others, including you have no choice but to get children into a classroom during the pandemic. So how do you deal with even slower interconnections or people who are tethering from their phone maybe to join these calls? But also, how do you set up the calls, and then how do you do the follow-up afterwards? Zoom had a better understanding, I think, of the jobs to be done for a larger audience than GoToMeeting had, and that got them to more than 10 times the revenue by today, even though they started later. So if you're thinking, oh, there's another business that I'm competing with, and I don't know how to overtake them, if you understand the customer better, they're not going to win against you. So that's the area to focus on. Nowadays, because we're talking about AI, Zoom also gives you AI summaries of calls, and it will try to highlight which sections of the calls are most meaningful to you. It's early days for this kind of technology, but it's disruptive, and I think if they really understand what you're doing with the recordings, they'll win and make that more relevant. Just going back to our understanding and how much it shapes your business, anyone remember WebEx? Before GoToMeeting, they're probably the company that caused half those problems I talked about. They're like, you have to download it first, you have to have the right version, you have to have an account, you need to remember the password. But their problem was a whole different one. What they were focused on, because they're based off part of Cisco, is that transformation from kind of copper phone lines to voice over IP, and then maybe have some calls over the internet. And that's really limiting. That's not what Zoom solves anymore. Zoom goes much further. Nowadays, if someone sends me a WebEx link, I'm going to respond with a Zoom link instead. So that's probably says everything you need to know. I just want to give you a quick shorthand as well, if you're trying to figure out whether a business has understood your job to be done. Enterprises love having the split between products and the solutions tab on their navigation. And I work in design, so the fact that we have to reframe again and again what we do shows you there is an issue still today. But if the solutions for your industry, like government or education or something, on those websites resonates with you, you can have some level of confidence and understand you as a customer. If it's been written by a marketer who actually has never spoken to a customer, you'll notice that too. So pay attention to it and make sure that your understanding of customer is reflected in how you sell your product. So here's an example of some of the leading edge AI work that companies ship today. And this is ADP. They have 1 million employers internationally using their platform to manage 41 million employees. If you ever had a bad boss, you want them to have ADP in future so they become better. And I'll tell you why. Example here is that Jane applied for a job internally and didn't get it. It's not the manager's decision whether she gets a job or not. It's someone else's decision. But in this holistic view of an employee, we know that, and we can probably prompt the manager, as we're doing here, to say, hey, Jane didn't get that job, but you want to invest in your staff. What was the gap? Find out what training she might need and how you can support her so that it's a slam dunk promotion next time when you get to it. And there are lots of ways like that of how you can use this positively. On the side, you also see job applications. We went through this phase where pattern recognition for applications meant you get terrible CVs that just have keywords all over them, whether you ever touch the software or not. With AI, we can go further. We can probably infer understanding to an extent and hopefully have better matches that are more accurate and more inclusive. So how to think about leveraging AI for your business now. First, we've got a few levels here, so I'll just step aside so you can see them. First one is to add GPT to your surfaces. It might just be a quick summary of information you see on screen. The second level is to automate the workflows for your customers. So if they are going into the software to maybe apply a label, can you have a better guess of what that label should be? And maybe just approve it, or maybe they don't even have to approve because you can go even further. The third level is to replace the workflows for your customers. So if you really understand what they're trying to do, you can probably cut out whole steps. And that will make them feel great, like the heroes they are in their organizations. And the final level, really difficult, is do the work for your customers. so that they might not even have to go into the application because they have trust that their problem is going to be solved. If you achieve that, they're going to be elevated to a more strategic place in whatever role they are today, and they're going to love you for it, and they're going to take you to the next place where they work, if you sell B2B. I'm not loving the clicker. Oh, here we go. All right. 2 other examples of Gen AI applied. Sprout Social is trying to sell, here someone is trying to sell a seasonal lavender latte. Now, I wasn't rushing out after I saw this example, but AI can help you phrase, for example, multiple messages. So you say, I have an engagement with customers over 2-3 posts to try and get them convinced that maybe lavender should be in your drink, and maybe, yes, that is a good color. You should phrase, get those messages and get that support. On the other hand, a lot of people will have seen this already, I'm sure. If you're buying on Amazon today, it gives you an AI summary of all the customer reviews, so you don't have to go through them one by one. The good, the bad, the ugly. And it just gives you confidence beyond what the seller is listing in the listing, that it actually is a good product. And it's a really helpful use of that technology. I mentioned jobs and CVs and applications, and this is where some of the tricky stuff comes in around these technologies. We all know about bias. You've heard this before. You're probably thinking, I want to be careful about actually using that and won't it lead to unfair outcomes. It's really important that you keep the human in the loop. You want the human judgment, even with all the assistance we're providing. Another example of that is Gartner and Morgan Stanley as analysts. They make really big decisions and suggestions that businesses are going to spend tens of millions of dollars on. You don't want a machine to decide that without second thought. But a machine can help analysts in those kinds of companies maybe draft a report, review it, have an understanding, or synthesize more data than a person can get. Or maybe explore divergent thinking, alternative ideas to challenge the analyst to just check whether they have gone through the level of thorough thinking that people are paying for. So it should always end with the human decision. Don't delegate all of that to AI, but you can definitely ease the burden on them and accelerate them. Now, I've already talked about finding the customer's pain point, understanding the job to be done. The next thing for you to win in your business is you need to figure out what is non-core and kind of what's your golden use case. So the non-core stuff, I'm going to say is a little bit annoying because it's table stakes. You just have to do it. There's no arguing about it. Without that, you're not going to be part of the conversation. But that doesn't mean that you win yet as a business. So the golden or the core use cases is how you pull away from the competition and how you lead the conversation of where product is going in your particular industry. And that's where you want to focus your efforts. You do still have to do the other stuff. So here are a couple of those golden use cases. DealerFX is a company that deals with car dealerships across the US. They have Pendo on their booking system. They use the analytics from that to export into their own ML model, and they can now predict with an 80% accuracy the busyness of essentially their engagement. So how often are people going to show up? How many appointments are they going to book? And that means you can provide a much better experience to any one customer. You can make sure you're staffed appropriately, you have the resources in place. You might message people during a quiet period and say, hey, that appointment is available 2 weeks earlier than you thought, just because you have that level of insight. The other example here is McGraw-Hill, big education company. New Alex AI for them reduced the time spent on assessments by 20%. And if you've worked in education, you know how annoying the assessments are. Also, you know how important it is that you get that right, because that is how you prove the efficacy of the actual teaching you do. So think about your moat. How do you separate yourself from competition where they can't catch up? You will have proprietary data in your business that if you apply correctly, you apply these models, you apply them to a job to be done, you apply that to a pain point, you can get to a point where no one else can catch up with you because you have that level of insight, understanding, and the capability that puts you apart. So here's my quick recap. First, focus on the fundamentals, solve an actual user pain, find your golden use case, and then leverage your first-party data to build your moat. And if you want to learn more about this, we partnered with Mind the Product to have an AI for product management course. You can get certified, and I'm pretty certain that employers are going to look for these kinds of skills with any one of you going forward. And with that, that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. We have more space for seating in here if you guys wanted to come through. Yeah, QR code for those who hasn't scanned it before. And yeah, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Sam. Sam is an AI product manager at PwC, and he actually used to be a data scientist, so he'll tell us all of the complicated stuff. All right, over to you, Sam.
Thank you. Cool. Joe teed me up very well. I think I'm going to be doubling down on a lot of the lessons that Joe's already spoken about. Hey everyone, I'm Sam. I'm a product manager at PwC. That's PricewaterhouseCoopers, if anyone was unsure of what that might be. It's a large professional services company, massive global reach. Let's just go next. Yeah, massive global reach. I think there's offices in 151 countries, over 350,000 employed staff as well. I'm one of them. I've worked in the AI team for 5 years now, and for 3.5 years specifically as a product manager, leading on AI initiatives and products. And what I'd like to do today is explain some of the lessons that I've learned on that journey. I'm having problems with the clicker as well. Cool. Again, to double down, you've all heard about the AI hype. Just last week, Google unveiled a flagship large language model called Gemini 1.5. It's basically an opportunity for users to analyze even more of their data. And right on cue, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, released a page containing text to video content. And it's a shame I didn't put this as a GIF, but do search for the model Sora and go through that page. It's got videos of Labradors playing in the snow, woolly mammoths walking along in Siberia. There's another one from like a Western movie drone shot, which is quite grainy from the mid-1800s. It's unreal, and it just shows how far the technology is coming and how quickly it's moving as well. And then on the hardware front, we've got a company called NVIDIA. They now have the third highest market value in the world, in front of Alphabet, which is Google, and Amazon as well. So they're just behind Apple and Microsoft. Now they create the chips which you absolutely need for all of this generative AI work and to run these large language models. And then you've probably spoken with your colleagues and friends about the way that your jobs might change. So there will be different influences on different sectors. Some jobs will be diminished, but many will be created as a result of AI and the emergence of it. It depends what sector you're in. I put the Goldman Sachs statement there because there's a really good report. I'd advise reading that. Cool. So it is significantly in demand across industry. There's 80% of the Fortune 500 companies who apparently are engaging with OpenAI, which is Microsoft owned, and Google, who have infrastructure kind of everywhere in the big companies. They've been doing AI for years with their Doc AI series, with the Vertex AI models. And then Meta, they're more on the open source front with some of the researchers and smaller businesses. And if you were a company who wanted to generate opportunities without actually increasing your headcount, you could go to a company like 11x. And 11x has lots of AI assistants. One of them is Alice here. What Alice will do is, she's an outbound sales rep. She will configure all of the kind of priorities that you might have for potential clients. She'll go out and scour the web for those clients, and then she'll politely meet with them. She'll put time in your calendar, and effectively you're growing the company in terms of revenue without actually growing the headcount. It's crazy times. Cool. So I've been working on products for 5 years. Those are people I call my friends. I had to anonymize them. PwC are quite strict, unfortunately. Next slide. Great. So what does PwC do? Well, it's been around for years and years, 175 years. And from the pen, ink, and paper phase on the left-hand side with Price, Holy Land, and Waterhouse, all the way through to the cloud computing era, it will persistently use the best technology that is available to it. Now, across that era, this is just the More London office, by the way. If anyone's walked past that, it's next to Tower Bridge. If you've gone past there at night, you might have seen a lot of the lights on and people working late into the night on critical projects, exciting projects, but there is still a lot of manual, repetitive labour that people have to do. That effectively is down to the inefficiencies of the technology not being good enough, but also because there's a lot of projects on, that can result in some low morale, high attrition rates for those teams, and it impacts the unlocked revenue, where people instead could be going out and getting opportunities. They're doing some of the manual work, like copying information from this document onto another one. That's the role of the tech team and why AI is critical. Let's go next. To PwC. So what PwC have been doing, especially with the rise of AI very recently, is investing heavily in models like Harvey AI. That's what the deals practice and the legal practice are using. It's a large language model that has been trained on lots of legal documents. And this came out of the US, so they're willing to spend £1 billion, or dollars even, on chatbot assistants. And then in the UK, ChatGPT Enterprise has been purchased as well. So all of this is with the aim to reduce the inefficiencies in the business and increase the opportunities that we're able to get. Now, it looks like I didn't group the left side of here, but imagine this kind of Venn diagram here. AI has a number of fields. Robotics, decision optimization, and computer vision are three of them that I've picked out. There's another one called natural language processing, which is the focus of the talk today and the experiences that I've got. Because PwC has a lot of documents and a lot of meetings, we could create a face recognition software, sure, but our clients and the actual people in the company are more interested in documents. I've also done a lot of immersive work as well, so if anyone here is interested in VR, AR, that's right up my street too. In terms of the different subsets of AI in natural language processing, I've just picked out 4 common ones that you might have heard of. The rules-based AI, so if this, then that. You might have seen sentiment analysis of tweets. So if you wanted to understand how a market is feeling about a certain topic, you can assess the negative and positive tweets within that and the aggregation of that. If you wanted to look at the machine learning that you might have used, again, another Amazon one. This one is on product recommendations, though. The named entity recognition of things that you've bought, that will feed into the algorithm and show you things that you might want to buy. Siri, through saying that, people's phones might go off. Mine has a bit. That's a neural net, so that's machine learning with a neural net, and what that can do is that can take context for what you're saying to it, and when you go down even further and you want massive neural nets, you've got generative AI, which is like ChatGPT. Cool. These are the points that we're going to go through. And the first one is to understand your user's needs. Now, I've used the DALL-E model to create this image because it's about saying use the right tool for the job, right? You should really use a screwdriver for that application, and I've used a wrench instead. But fundamentally, again, like Joe was saying, it's about understanding your users' pain points and what their goals are, and that should kind of drive the features that you build for them. So the point about this slide is you don't actually necessarily need AI. That might be controversial, but I've worked on a document review tool, and that would allow users to upload thousands of their documents, search through them for keywords, filter on them, export the results. That actually generated so many opportunities for the company and was the driver for so much efficiency gain that you don't necessarily need AI. the AI overlays did come, and definitely it does improve the nature of the tool, but you don't need to start there. You need to get the fundamentals right. And the next one. So data is the fuel for AI. Just before we touch on the quote, I think as product managers, when we go onto a new initiative or product, we don't necessarily have responsibility over the data systems and processes that are already in place. Especially in a big company, data is everywhere. And I've spoken to clients and they'll say things like 80% of the work for this project is actually on the data engineering and 20% was on the analysis or the value add. So in a big company, things like a data catalog are excellent. But fundamentally, garbage in, garbage out. If you've got low quality data, the AI project is not going to run that well. I worked on an advisory tool where we tried to digitize corporate structures. So corporate structures are effectively loads of boxes and nodes connecting the boxes. And what we wanted to do was digitize them such that users could query them for risks and opportunities. Now, the rules-based approach that we started with was reasonable, but we were finding that the nodes weren't actually connecting to the boxes. So we thought, okay, let's go down the ML approach, the machine learning approach, and we decided to create a load of synthetic group structures, hundreds of thousands of them, and actually train those with a generative adversarial network in the computer vision space. And it worked really well in theory, so the experiment worked. The issue when it actually came to the project is that we could not get the quantity and quality of group structures that we needed. So as a product manager, what I should have done actually was assess, how many can we feasibly get before even embarking on such an experiment, whilst it was interesting. And also, Andrew Ang, he is a worthwhile person to have on here. He's got a ton of courses on Coursera. He's got an incredible Gen AI course as well. It's about 5 hours long, so I'd consider doing that to anyone who doesn't know the space. Cool, especially prevalent in PwC, there are highly regulated fields. So take an audit use case. If we get something wrong for the client and it's 99% accurate, that's not good enough. We're liable for anything that goes wrong. So we need to make sure that we're using a human in the loop. Again, to double down. So let's look at a quote from Sam Altman, who is the ChatGPT OpenAI CEO currently. He, over a year ago, 2022, said, "It is incredibly limited." And he's right, there's misinformation, there's hallucination that I'm sure we've all seen. There's also systematic bias, and they try to counter that with human reinforcement learning to ensure that it's saying the right topics. There's also a lack of memory. So, who won the Ballon d'Or in 2023? Does anyone know who won the football Ballon d'Or? Messi, there we go. Yeah, so Messi won his 8th, but ChatGPT doesn't know that because the model was trained at a point in time. So the fundamental thing here is when we build tools, and we built a question and answer tool which plugged into Google models, Microsoft OpenAI models. We tried a lot of them. We need to ensure that on the product itself we put disclaimers and we advocate that you need that specialist to actually review the answers. So this question and answer tool was actually very useful on use cases. We were able to get users to query thousands of documents and ask questions of them. We would direct them to the provenance of the answer in the document as well. But we had to make them aware that, look, we might not be feeding the right answer in the response. Safeguard user data. I think a lot of companies could be posted on here, but an example that came up mostly towards the beginning of 2023 to the middle of 2023 was examples like Samsung, who had an employee use ChatGPT, feed confidential data into the model, and that inadvertently trains the model, and there's a risk that the answer could be regurgitated outside of that Samsung ecosystem. So the response of these companies was to immediately block any generative AI use, which I think is a fair one. You need to contain big issues. And what they've now been doing, and PwC have been doing it very well as well, is introducing the kind of governance and structures that are required. Ensure you know where your data is going to. We've had models that we've wanted to use, but the data passed through the US, and that just wasn't going to fly for some of the use cases we've got. You need to ensure that you're operating on the correct instance, so that the model is not training on your data. Don't feed in highly confidential data. There's a long list of things that big companies probably have governance steps on, so make sure that you're aware of those and use it ethically. Strategic decisions. There's a few things that I want to cover on this slide. So it's all about knowing when to pivot, anticipating the right time to move on from something you're doing. I mean, I'd love to show you, but... Okay. Again, this is an image that I created on DALL-E. I think it shows what I'm trying to say quite well. You need to calculate if the proposal is actually going to be more cost-effective than the current approach. It's quite obvious, really. If you've got something that is currently working for the next 10 years, potentially, and you're proposing something that has a high upfront cost to develop, it's got a high maintenance cost. In addition to that, there might be some human in the loop and review that you need to take into account. That cost might be more than the current process. So it might be a kind of clunky process, but why would you move away from that? Plenty of tools that we build actually, PwC being 350,000 people, there's kind of an economy of PwC, right, in different territories as well. It gets quite complicated, but we tend to build a lot of tools, and there's often convergence with the big tech who will end up building it anyway. An example I've got here is Microsoft Fabric, which is like a big data lake. So if you've got terabytes of data, you can put it into there. And Power BI is a dashboarding tool. That Copilot, you should definitely have a look at that. Any data engineering, any data analytics platforms need to be aware of these companies and the kind of value that they can bring, because it's just going next level. They can have access to the underlying data set and query it and generate massive reports. ChatGPT Enterprise, we've spoken about that loads, but all of the add-ons are kind of consuming startups that are already out there. I've painfully gone through it a couple of times in my company where functionality we've decided to build, ultimately in a year or two will be released on ChatGPT Enterprise. So the business says it's a cool thing to work on, but we're not gonna invest in it. We're just gonna wait. The third one is the idea to bespoke. That's just a shelf that fits very neatly into that space, and that is a bespoke thing. It might fit somewhere else, to be fair, and it might suit someone else. But we had a topic modeling project which was on top of the document review tool, and the customers were actually very happy with the work we'd done. They could see emerging themes and trends within the documents that they were publishing, and the reason why is because we'd fine-tuned the AI system to their documents, and we realized that it wasn't going to be flexible enough to work with other approaches. So ultimately, the client was happy, and we were doing stuff for their needs, but we weren't going to be able to productize that. So you need to be very aware of, I think, those three things as you go. Right, and my sixth point is maintain the edge in continuous development. It's about iterating on existing features. I wanted to put these two graphs up. You might struggle to see them at the back, but the point is that on the left, the cost to run equivalent models year on year is reducing. GPT-3, appreciate we don't have the years on. Not quite sure when that was released off the top of my head. I don't want to get it wrong. But that was definitely before GPT 3.5. And you can see that the cost to actually run these models improves, and the use cases actually will open up, when you can use different models. And just the same on the right-hand side, we've got a context window increase year on year with different models. This was even from May 2023. I think if you go back to the second slide, the Gemini, that's at 1 million, I think, and experimentally 10 million. So that's hardly worth even. These would be a footnote, kind of in comparison to what we've got now. And the point around this is consider the environment and what you can potentially bring into the product. We had a product that, again, going back to the question and answer tool, any responses that were populated, we could track what the emerging and significant themes were from that, and that would direct us onto, okay, maybe we should do a proof of concept in this area. And you can also keep the stickiness of users on the platform through gamification techniques and just analyzing user behavior through usability studies, do all of that stuff to get them to keep giving you their data in that case. Cool, so just to wrap it up, if you're building a product with AI in it, do consider these 6 things. I think understand your users' needs, their pain points, their goals. Try and use a product management system as well. I think that's critical so that you can track a pipeline and check for crossovers. Data is the fuel for AI. You might not be able to do much about it as a product manager, but just be aware of the constraints you're under. Human expertise matters. Depends what field you're in. I'm in quite a regulated area, so it does matter to me. Safeguard user data. Don't be exposed. And strategic decisions. It is quite complicated in my area of the world because there might be partners who want the next shiny AI thing, but as a product manager, it's also up to us to say, just push back. If it's not the right thing for the company to do because something else is coming along, or whatever reason you've got, say that, and then iterate on the product. Work with users all the way through. Cool. That's everything. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam. For those of you who are standing in the corridor, there are some spaces left if you wanted to have a seat for the last part of the talk. All right, and our last but not least speaker for tonight is Fernanda.
Time. Lucky me. Hi, everyone. I'm Fernanda. It's a pleasure to be here. Just before we start, can I get a show of hands? Who is not in product in the room currently? Wants to get in? Okay, a couple. And who is working B2B? That's okay. Big on this side. And who's working B2C? All right, some representation, great. And curveball, who's a parent? Awesome, welcome. Well, especially thank you for being here. We know how valuable your time is. So I'm going to talk today about 3 lessons I've learned building an AI product for parents. And I'll start by introducing myself. So as I said, I'm Fernanda. I've been building behavior change products in one way or another for almost a decade. And I'm currently VP of Product at Batelle. And we're on a mission to improve educational and healthcare outcomes of those first crucial years of life. And we're starting with sleep. Now, why are we starting with sleep? Well, the parents in the room will know it can be a pretty big problem. When your child doesn't sleep, nobody in the household sleeps. There's master negotiation tactics at play, and it becomes a really, really important problem. And we know that, you become a parent, you're probably not going to sleep in those first few months as expected. You're waking up every few hours to feed and to take care of your child. But as time progresses, actually, a lot of parents are still struggling with putting their kids to sleep. And that's because evolutionarily, kids associate safety with being near their parent. And so when they wake up in the middle of the night, they're alone, they're in danger. They cry for mom and dad, or they run into their bedroom. And as wonderful as that is, it can be really crazy when it's 3 in the morning and you have to get to work the next day. And so we've developed a method of essentially habit stacking and an attachment-based way to create a sense of safety for little ones. So it's a behavior change method that parents and kids go through so that their kids can feel safe in their sleep space and they can get to sleeping through the night. And that sounds great in theory, but it's a lot of hard work for parents as well. We know behavior change is hard. And so that's what we're in the business of. We've helped thousands of families get to better sleep. And we did that through a mix of personalization and real human support. And so Batelle, for the past few years, has basically customers come in, they have an intake questionnaire of about 50 questions. It creates a personalized program for their family, for their child. And we had a team of 24/7, round-the-clock sleep coaches there at 3 in the morning to help with your every need. Now, that sounds expensive. It was expensive. And that meant it couldn't be that accessible. And so when this big change came with generative AI and large language models, we were kind of in the perfect storm of opportunity as a business. We had a lot of data. We had a team that was 24/7 that was able to help train that data. And so it became really obvious that the next step should be, okay, we launch a more affordable version of the product, and we make it AI-driven, and everyone will be happy, and parents will solve all their problems, and suddenly we're all over the world, right? So we did what any design product team will do, right? We talked to a lot of customers about AI. We talked to them about pricing, about the market, about our excitement and the opportunity, and this is what we were met with. I had a lot of parents turn to me and say, I just tried to rebook a flight on WhatsApp and it took me 3 hours and I couldn't find a human, and you really want me to trust that technology with the most precious thing in my life? I'm not so sure about this. And yet, here we are. I think we in this room, I'm preaching to the choir, know the huge potential for this technology. We know that there's a paradigm shift happening that's as big, if not bigger, than the iPhone. That's going to change all the way we work and live our lives, the way we parent, the way we coach. And so, okay, we're not going to go from 0 to 100. How can we craft this in a way that is still going to be really valuable to our end user? Kind of what these guys were talking about before. How do you make that pain point and really understand? And so these are some of the lessons we learned. The first one was give users a choice. We already knew that our customer was willing to pay for and wanted and was helped by having a human in the loop and human support. And so what we did for V1 is we gave them a choice. Okay, you could have the $1,500 product where you have a human 24/7, but you'd also have a more affordable version where suddenly you have the choice between messaging a human who'll get back to you within 24 hours, Monday to Friday, business hours, or you have Elle. She's short, the name came from Batelle, and very creatively named by one of our engineers. And she's there 24/7, 3 in the morning, at any time. She's got data personalized to your situation, contextual information, and she can be there when you need her to be. And so with that, we saw, okay, we've got some engagement. We see different kind of usage, right? Some parents, they take the let's throw everything at the wall approach. I'll ask Elle everything I can. When she fails me, I'll go into the other channel and I'll escalate to a sleep guide. And then there were topics that we automatically escalated as a business. We knew that anything related to safety, for example, we had a system by which Elle would then tag someone on the team to respond as soon as possible, because there are things that, as was said before, are just out of bounds for the technology where it is. And then we had other parents who maybe were a bit more circumspect. They knew the certain kinds of questions that they could trust on AI, and there were certain things they would rather discuss with the coach. And that was totally fine. And we saw our engagement increase a little bit, but we still had about a 2-to-1 ratio of messages to experts versus to Elle. So that led me to our second lesson, which is that first impressions matter. This should surprise no one in this room. My mother was telling me this since I was about the age to do sleep training. You want to make a good first impression. And so we all know that onboarding matters. So what we did here is we started including prompts and ways to make the engagement start with the AI first. So we had that very long questionnaire that led to the AI introducing themselves, personalizing to things for that family, for that child, that already started building trust. And we got some interesting questions. You can't see the bubbles around, but like a parent essentially asked, who programmed you? And Elle introducing herself, being part of the experience. And someone else asked, thank you. How come you seem like a person? You're very helpful. To which Elle says, you're making me blush, and the user responds, lol, okay, thank you. And it's actually very sweet. You start to see the engagement, people being very polite and really humanizing that experience. Oh. But we still had an issue that we had the content and the curriculum, and then you had the interaction and the chat. And a lot of parents were a little bit stumped. They don't know what to ask. When they have a question and it's obvious, sure, but sometimes they're not exactly sure what they should be learning, and they enjoy that. And we wanted to increase engagement, of course. And so we started thinking of ways that we could be more proactive in using that data and tying the content to their personal contextual experience. And so what we did is we layered on, now it's my turn, there we go. And so we layered on a feature set that in 3 different ways to create that proactive conversation with parents. So on the left-hand side, we have one of our lessons, and it's about habit stacking. Habit stacking is really at the core of the methodology that we have, and the idea is essentially your child may have some sleep habits, and they may be unsustainable sleep associations, like they need the parents to be there holding their hand all night long, or they need to be held to fall asleep. So by habit stacking, you layer on new habits, say music or soft light or other rituals, and then you layer off the ones that were unsustainable. And it's a very important thing. It's not the most obvious concept. And so through the content, it's also not necessarily personalized. And so through that, we were able to prompt, okay, ask Elle, how does habit stacking work with my current routine? And then the AI is able to coach a parent step by step, okay, how can we take this content and personalize it to your unique situation, to your unique family? And what we've seen through this evolution is that now we're at a point where engagement is about 4-to-1 to the AI versus a sleep guide, which I think is incredibly promised for the direction this is going. And so where do we go from here? Well, we all know that we want engagement to go up, we want our CSATs and our NPSs to go up, right? And we're starting to see with AI where the touch points in time that a good experience will cause kind of a domino effect for a user to come back. And we also see a huge opportunity for further personalization, further stickiness. I think it was mentioned, right, the data, garbage in, garbage out. What's really interesting here is if you can build that flywheel with users, the more they use it, the more data you have. It creates a flywheel of engagement. The more personalized it becomes, the stickier it becomes. Literally, we are growing up with these children, which is really exciting. Because it means that you have a coach and a companion through the formative, most important years of someone's life, and you're really able to be there in those moments where parents need us the most. So I'll leave you guys with one last interaction that we had with a parent that just happened yesterday, I think. And we see a parent saying, it's 3 a.m. here, he's responding well. I was also patting his back, but now I'm not. The AI kind of responds, asks a follow-up question. He seems to be back to sleep now. Thank you. And you know that parent, it's 3 in the morning, they're exhausted, but they've taken the time to say thank you. And I'm not always someone who's the most optimistic about these technologies. I think they're a double-edged sword. There's a lot of good, a lot of bad. But hopefully what I've shown you today is an example that there is a lot of potential to do good and a lot of potential to really positively impact people with some of these tools. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fernanda. We'll take like a 3-minute break if you wanted to grab a drink or something while we set up the stage, and then we'll do a Q&A afterwards. And make sure you submit your questions or upvote the existing ones. Cool, we'll be back at 8. All right. We are ready to start the Q&A, and thank you so much for submitting all of your questions. The most popular one, as I'm sure all of you did. Yeah, the advice is not to quote McKinsey, but you guys can check it out later. Anyway, the first question of today is, how do you evaluate AI POCs as a product manager in terms of feasibility, value, long-term versus short-term, etc.?
I'm a designer. I'm going to give this to a product manager.
Yeah. I think there's different complexities. I can speak from the perspective of massive professional services company. There's a ton of people all over the business who want to use generative AI in particular at the minute, but even before that, other AI activations or just tech processes where they want a workflow to be improved. What they've put together in my business is a way to collate all of those and then triage them in focused specialist sessions. So when it actually comes to the product manager, we've automatically got something that pretty much fits the kind of work that we need to do. When it kind of hits my desk, though, it's a case of going straight to the users, again, understanding their pain points. But fundamentally, I want to make sure that all of the technology is used in the right way. So I work very closely with developers, and I'll ensure that the use case that we're building is feasible given the resourcing that we've got for a number of months probably. And you want to make sure that commercially it's viable. So that return on investment is probably the first calculation that I would do. I would assess with the users what the existing process costs for a year and maybe expand that out over a number of years. And then I would take what the proposed approach is after doing all of the kind of speaking with developers and users, and I would simply say, okay, is the new proposal more expensive or less expensive than the current way that we do it? And then that would then go off for approval and get the right sign-off. So I think being commercially minded is critical. Understanding that the users are on board is also critical. But also, another thing that I've thought of is maybe, well, there's the governance steps as well, but ensuring that it's something that your team wants to work on, because we've got quite a few things that we could potentially spend the next few months doing. Do we as people want to show up to work and do it? I've said about 10 different things there, but it is it's multivariant, right?
Cool, perfect. Fernanda, there is a question for you. How did you decide to invest building L versus using an already existing tool such as Intercom, which is already becoming a business as well?
Yeah, we the flexibility of it was something we already had some of the infrastructure there, but it was really thinking about, I think our co-founders were really visionary, understanding even before the GPT explosion. We did some things that were contrarian when the company first started. I think to be chat first when the company started was in a way rather contrarian, but they kind of saw this as being an evolution that was eventually going to happen. And therefore, there was an importance placed on the data from the very beginning. Like, how can we have clean, structured data? Even having a 24/7 support team, how do we make sure every observation is recorded in a way that's usable, that will be longer term, something that's valuable to the business that we can build on? And so it was really about creating the infrastructure for the data, because we knew that was going to be of long-term value.
Excellent, thank you. For the last few years, has been about optimizing AI on UX as an invisible force. But now AI is very much on surface and very less UX finesse. Do you see design evolve, Joe?
Do I see design evolve? Yes, 100%. It's a difficult topic because it's exploratory still, I think. We went from, I think my bio starts with floppy disks. So just if you go back to that time, you started on a terminal where all you had was a text input, and it was really difficult to discover what was actually behind that. What are the options that you've got? What level of assistance can the tool give you? And at the time, probably not very much. moving to this point, now we came back full circle to kind of text interfaces again. You just have an input. And you've seen this in Fernanda's talk earlier, where you started with an interface that is just, hey, ask us when you're ready to ask us the question. And she finished on, let's be proactive, and we'll actually prompt you, like these might be the right questions to ask at this point, and where do you go from there? There's no way we're at the end of that model. The other thing about giving feedback is we can now analyze the responses people give, and something like finishing up with a thank you, you can probably infer that this is a good interaction. But I think our models of how we capture feedback aren't sophisticated yet. Often it's like thumbs up, thumbs down. It's really difficult to make a better model that has a better prediction next time on that, unless you have huge scale. And there aren't that many businesses, because you'll probably can name most of them, because they're big enough to have that kind of scale. So you want to have a more high fidelity bit of feedback, and that's something that products still struggle with. Usually I find leadership also hasn't had a good understanding of, because these models are new to them. So you want to ideally get feedback of the type that gives you the correct answer, so next time you can refer to that. So if Netflix is a big enough company that they don't need this help, but imagine it suggests you 3 movies and you tell it what to view instead. Now, you're actually doing that once you start playing. I stay in that next movie. So you have told them, in effect, you recommended this stuff, here's my actual choice. But if that's off-platform, they're not going to know. And I think there are a lot of things around like how we present, become more proactive in that, help people explore what the capabilities are, and then how we capture feedback in higher fidelity that'll change these interfaces forever. If I knew the answer, I'd... Yeah,
I have something to add to that, which I think we're seeing an evolution beyond the 2D, right? Like voice has, we had the Internet of Things, if you think about the hype cycle, right? That hyped and then it went down and nobody thought about it for a while. Siri became limited to turning on your lights and telling you what the weather was. But now we kind of see that coming back. We see the work of 11 Labs is really interesting with generative voice, generative video, and going back to like hardware devices and that interaction. So I think UX is going to go back to being a lot more 3D as time progresses.
Excellent, thank you. How can you upskill in AI when your startup has limited resources and cannot implement AI solutions right now? Asked by a PM with no coding experience.
We have a free course, Partner with Mind the Product, and that is AI for product management. There's lots of resources out there. Sam shared quite a few as well. I think the coding is not the necessary aspect. It depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? We talked about design a little bit. Fernanda also gave an answer on that. So I didn't mention anything that forced you to understand how it was built literally in the coding sense. There are also some just great pieces written by people over the years about how, for example, adversarial or I forget the name now, but multi-layer neural network works. That's been written by people who were grappling with their own understanding of it. So seek that out, because that actually gets you to that next level of understanding without having to understand the fundamentals yourself yet.
I think Sam also recommended the course by, was it Andrew Ng?
Yeah, Andrew Ang. That's a course that I did. He's got a machine learning course, but more recently a generative AI course, which is a few hours. I think there's some really good content on there for learning about the business side as well of generative AI. It's not just literally how the models work, and it also goes into how the hardware operates. I think a lot of my learning actually comes from chatting to people. I guess I'm quite lucky that I do have I used to do a bit of data science and development, but also the developers, they're always happy to speak about the intricacies of how things work. Appreciate being in a startup, there might not be the same scale of people that you might have readily available that I would have in that case, but also through creating kind of stories of AI. So for this presentation that I did, I went through a situation, complication, question, answer approach, and I think you can kind of pin that to a lot of the AI sphere, where you could ultimately learn about why employment might be going down or up in a certain sector. And if you do that thinking yourself, you can then hopefully regurgitate that to other people. It depends what you're trying to do, if you're trying to code or just speak with authority on it.
I think it's also a good question to ask ChatGPT to help you with that.
That's what I was going to say.
But yeah. Okay, cool. Earlier, Web3 was derided as an example of hype in product tech by Joe. How do we know that AI or Gen AI won't experience the same decline in interest? And why is Gen AI different?
Because you're using it today.
Some people use Web3 as well. They bought NFTs.
Find me at the bar, tell me what you're doing and why it's useful to you. Sorry, I know it's a flippant comment because it's built on lots of fundamental technologies that I was in a business of migrating and replicating data. I'd used many of the same technologies that create nowadays blockchains, but at the time it wasn't called that. And there's fundamental research from back in the 70s about how this all fits together. We haven't found the killer business case yet in 50 years. Maybe this year is the one, and I'm wrong about it. If you see big VCs in the Bay Area, one of the things they do out of pride is just they put a page up that tells you all the big things they missed that they didn't invest in. So think about it that way. You'll be able to celebrate one day being successful in your Web3 startup, pointing out how Joe was wrong on this stage today, and it'll be a source of pride for me that I didn't understand it and connect it back to that.
Yeah, I think over the last 20 years, there's been massive shifts in the performance of AI models. So AI is able to generate classes and like classify and label things. So we've got very good at that. Now what generative AI is able to do is take all of those like labeled data structures and it's able to predict things about them, and it's operating in a similar way to humans through some of the agent work. So imagine, when you came to ProducTank today, you may have left work and made the decision to get on the bus or cycle here, and your route will have varied. Now, these generative AI systems can actually act in those kind of decision-making ways. I think the critical aspect of large language models at the moment and why they're different is that they're able to do it at such scale as well. And when you apply them across different sectors of AI, in terms of natural language, you've got any kind of improvement that happens in DNA sequencing or image recognition or something, because we've got these large language models now, those innovations apply across sectors, and that's kind of why we're seeing this exponential growth in the amount of AI that we're seeing and the sectors that it's going into, and the kind of innovation growth curve that you may have seen from the Industrial Revolution through to now is massively accelerating just because of these like fundamental step changes year on year.
Yeah, I think the only thing to add to that is kind of a point that you started, which is this is the most human-like that we've had technology get to, which is both a scary and an exciting thing. And for that reason alone, it becomes unavoidable. If you look at the writers' strike in the US and the fundamental shift it's having on the entertainment industry already, Web3, because it was more infrastructure, was easier to kind of put aside and not become mainstream. But at your peril, will you be ignoring these technologies, I think.
How do you all use AI in your day-to-day job? How does it help you do your job better?
Okay, I think ChatGPT is very good for just ensuring that you're choosing the right kind of sentence. If I have a paragraph of text, of feedback that I need to give someone, I will redact things and ensure that I can get to the point quicker. So it's an efficiency tool. I think also, if I'm going into a meeting and I want to come up with a list of questions for a given topic, I think as a product manager, it's actually really good to just give you ideas. Even during the meeting, we've got an internal tool that pretty much takes an instance of ChatGPT but puts it within safe infrastructure in the company, so I can query that as well in the same way that you can ChatGPT. So I think efficiency for me, the images that I create for my presentation, that was another one. But in all seriousness, the tools that are being developed on ChatGPT for things like slide curation or automating processes that were once very manual, that will massively influence the product sector in the years to come. It's just some of these tools haven't quite reached the market. There's also, on the product management software that I use, we've got automated release notes and a few other things, but I think we're just getting started, really, with that.
Yeah, at work I use it in the examples I actually showed earlier. For example, MPS data and summary. I get asked to justify the kinds of investments that we're making as a business. The Discover product, again, we use it internally already, where we'll have summaries, we'll understand what certain segments need at given times. One fun personal use case for me is that I occasionally get WhatsApps I don't want to respond to because I don't have the additional time to really look into it, maybe. And I often use ChatGPT to draft that response for me first, especially if it's a question that I spend maybe a few minutes a year on generally, and people just somehow found me to talk about it. So I'll draft that, I'll sense check and I send it, and I help people with how their stock scheme should work. So if you work in a certain southeastern startup in the UK, just know your CEO messaged me at some point about it. ChatGPT answered. So good luck in that business.
I think in similar ways, I think note-taking, interview transcripts, summarization. I think for those who are not technical, ChatGPT is very good at like Excel formulas and troubleshooting Excel formulas. You can copy paste that error in, gets the job done. And I think the other thing is deciding when not to use it, right? When do I want to take notes, because the notes are going to help me process and keep this information, and like, again, what's the right tool for the job at the right time?
Just one more thing as well. I think it's not just the product managers who can benefit from these tools, developers. You reminded me that there's a GitHub Copilot.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's awesome for development. I think a study I saw was that it's made coding 20% more efficient. I don't know how people who are learning to code now are going to kind of rewire their brains compared to those who coded pre-GitHub Copilot, but it certainly gives you a ton of prompts that you can use in your code. And I think developers will be using that more and more if they're not already.
Excellent. We'll take the last question. There has been mention of human in the loop. As AI models improve and become more capable, do you anticipate there will be a declining need for human in the loop or not?
I think the role of the human will change, and it has done for a really long time. Like I'm no longer tilling the fields. I grew up on a farm, and technology has helped us elevate that. My belief is that we'll get ever closer to, if you think of kind of the hierarchy of needs of people, towards the top of that pyramid eventually. I know that model isn't fantastic, but what we're moving away from is like acting out of the necessity towards acting out of the joy. And you will see that around you if you look at events like this. We're not here out of necessity. You also see it in theater, in movies, and everything else. And I think some of that will be just easier and cheaper and more accessible. You mentioned Sora earlier, Sam mentioned on stage. Now, if you've ever dreamed of making a film, even a short film, how different is that next time you have a chance to think about that compared to what it was like 5 years ago? I don't think it's going to fundamentally make it worse in any way. It's just a much better tool to accelerate your path on that. And I think it's an exciting future.
If we get some things right, yes. But I think, just to expand on that, there was a really interesting study, I can't remember when it came out, but they looked at mugs and how people valued the same mug. But half the participants were told that it was handcrafted and it was made by this designer. You see where I'm going with this. And the other one was production created. And people were willing to pay a multiple of the price for the handcrafted one. And I think that's what we're going to see, right? We're going to see a premium for the human in the loop. It's already kind of happening at Batelle, just because the time of a person is more expensive, as it should be. And so I think that's probably the general trend.
Yeah, I think there will be certain industries that are massively disrupted, so legal, administrative, things that are like looking for clauses in documents. Those things are already being automated. Now businesses have a decision to make in those cases. Do they retain the workers that they've currently got and allow them to do more value-add work or perhaps take on more projects? Or do they, in the short term, cut those jobs? Now, there's a decision for leaders, really, on that front. So there will be sectors that are disrupted, but take like farming. If you automate a farm within all the constraints that it's currently got, and you double the output, you've got way more food for society. The prices hopefully drop of food. People have more disposable income for things like shelter or holidays or gym. We just don't, it's just so complicated. We don't know exactly what impact it's going to have, but we can tell already that some sectors or the nature of some jobs will be changed. And those people who, I think in those service jobs that don't adopt AI, I don't think AI is going to completely take their job, but staff or employees who are willing to use AI will take their job because they'll just be way more effective at a given process or activity.
Yeah, there's some really interesting experiments starting to happen with universal basic income in different parts of the world, and I think we're going to see a mix of, like private initiatives, but also structural governmental initiatives, because it is, just something that's going to touch all parts of society.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all of your insights today, and thank you all for coming. And feel free to stick around for drinks and some food if there's any left. But and we'll hope to see you during the next event in March.